chat with me as we go through our topic today. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with ticketing essentials. I've already got my pointer ready to go today. So we'll start out with our agenda, go through those housekeeping items in case we have any new people joining that are specifically just ticketing admins that maybe haven't been here before. And so we'll go through those housekeeping items and then talk about ticketing application security roles. Then we'll move on to creating service forms and then how to create custom attributes on those forms. And then we'll talk about status values. So statuses for tickets inside of your ticketing application. And then of course, we'll have time at the end for Q&A. But as always, you can ask questions throughout the presentation today as well. So our intended audience is anyone that is a TDX administrator, which does include app admins for ticketing applications. And so if you are specifically a ticketing app admin, then you're in the right spot. Project manager of the implementation, and then just anyone who is interested in setting up an application for tracking tickets. So that might be a service owner so that they can kind of understand how their tickets get processed, help desk contributors or team leads, just some other people who may want to learn from the content that we'll talk about today. Some prerequisites, so having your user record in the BE and access to TD admin, TD Next, and TD client, or the app admin access for the ticketing application specifically, so that you can make changes to the things we'll talk about today. Having attended the readiness and service catalog sessions also are helpful so that you can kind of build on the knowledge that you learned from those sessions. If you don't have those two things above, then that's okay. You can still stay and learn from today, but your active participation may be a little more limited. And then some helpful but not required things would be data points that were collected to provide a service for your organization. So that spreadsheet that we talked about yesterday, where you had the column where you would put in data points that you might need to provide a service, like a device model or an error message that's received. I think we talked about like Mac or PC as the desktop item that's needing help, those sort of things. And then the service that we created yesterday also is a helpful thing to kind of build on. So we created our service, and then today we can create a form that goes to that service. Some logistics follow along as we go. And this is just like yesterday. There's going to be homework associated with getting your environment set up. You won't walk away with everything done. You didn't yesterday and you won't today because you inevitably will have, a handful at least of forms that are specific to certain services. And so we'll kind of build one as practice today, and then you'll take that knowledge and build the rest of your forms in your tool. You are muted as an attendee, so ask your questions in the Q&A, and then the chat is also available, so you can send those messages to Michelle and I. The session is recorded and it will be transcribed. It just may take it a little bit of time for those transcriptions to show up and be searchable. And then all the links referenced today are found in the readiness course category in the knowledge base, which is linked in your link section of the implementation project. So this session, around an hour and a half, probably be a little bit less as we have a smaller group today. And I do tend to talk faster than some of our other presenters. But if I need to slow down, please just put a message in the chat. Let us know. I'm happy to do that. I just get excited about some of these topics and start talking quickly. So just let me know. We want to make sure that everybody's on the same page about everything. So our session outcomes, after the session today, we expect that you should be able to configure your security roles for the ticketing app, as well as configure some service forms, custom attributes on those forms, and then set up your status values for your ticketing app. All right. So let's go ahead and sign in to your BE and navigate to TD admin. If you are not a global admin, then you'll have to get to the admin section through your TD Next portal. So you won't be able to click that admin link there. Hopefully everyone has information on how to do that from our previous sessions. If you need help, let us know. Ticketing application security roles, our first topic here today. So the purpose of configuring ticket application security roles is for each application to have its own security role. So each ticketing app. So as our example from yesterday, the facilities ticketing app versus the IT ticketing app, they each have their own set of roles and security roles inside of those apps. And so the security team, the facilities team doesn't have to have the exact same permissions that the IT ticketing team sets up on their app, which is really nice. So you can have kind of different purposes and different settings. The roles control visibility and the actions that can be taken inside of the ticketing app in TD Next. So as an example, some of your technicians should be able to change SLAs on tickets, but you likely won't want all your technicians to be able to do that. You also may only want to give the permission to move a ticket to certain technicians. So if you want someone to be able to move a ticket from the IT app to the facilities app or something like that. So there's several items in the list that we can delineate and have like a senior technician, junior technician, or something like that. If you have a need to have delineations among your team. Sort of just depends on the size of teams for that purpose. The bigger the teams, the more delineations we usually see permission wise. How to configure a ticketing application security role. We'll do that in TD admin inside of applications inside of your ticketing app, and then the users and roles section in security roles. We click plus new to add a new role, and then you'll determine the license type for the users with this role. You'll need at minimum an enterprise role and a technician role. So for a ticketing app, you as an admin would have the highest level permissions, and then your technicians who are maybe only doing work inside of the tool, inside of the TD app, then they will have that technician role. So minimum those two, but you may have, as I kind of stated, some other delineations in between those two if that's necessary for your organization. We recommend starting from the defaults of the license type and then adjusting as needed. And so it's okay to not understand what every single permission means yet. They're not set in stone. I'll show you where you can kind of read a little bit of an explanation about that each permission when we go look at it in the tool in a moment. But this is something that you will probably come back to a few times throughout your configuration and implementation, because you'll kind of start to understand the interactions of the different purposes and how you will use different functions in the tool. And so you may decide, oh, we in fact don't want people to be able to do that, or we do. So you can come back and change those permissions at any time. We'll give the role a name, and then select save to commit that role to our environment. So a couple of articles here that Michelle has already added to the chat for helping getting started with the tickets and app specific security roles. All right, let's hop over to our environment and take a look at that. So I'm in my Sandbox Client Services today. And I'm going to, let's pick on a different ticketing app. We keep talking about facilities, so we'll look at facilities today. And so here I am inside of my facilities ticketing application, and I want to go to the users and roles section, and then security roles. So here I am inside of the ticketing app security roles section. And so this application already has 4 security roles created. So again, a minimum we would need 2, but you can see there's some other delineations here. We have a student technician working for facilities. So they have maybe less permissions than a full-time tech. And then a ticketing manager, which may have more permissions than the regular technician, but not the full access of our enterprise. And so that's a really good kind of spread of purposes in there. So what would be another reason? We'll just say part-time tech as another role that we may have within our ticketing app here. And so given that the name, and then I choose from the license types here. So there are several different sets. The main ones, of course, would be your enterprise and technician. And so this person is a full-time, they're not a student technician, but they're not a full-time technician. So that still falls into the license type of technician. So I'm going to choose that one. And then click over here on the select defaults button. This just gives you a starting point. And so this is what we would recommend a kind of an average technician would need. And so you see, I click that, and then we can see as we scroll down the boxes that have been checked for this role. If I flip this over to enterprise and then click select defaults, you can see it checks everything because the enterprise person should have access to do all of the things most likely. And so this just gives you kind of a starting point, like I said. So I'm gonna flip it back over to technician and click select default so that we get our list here. So this screen, if you click on the title of a permission, then it will open up another box that gives you a little bit more of an explanation as to what that permission is. Some at the very beginning stages, like we are right now, some of this you may be like, I don't really know exactly what that means because we haven't dug into the tool quite as much yet, but this can be helpful again as you start to learn the interactions of different pieces of the tool. So you get a little bit more information there. So at this point, I'm going to start with the defaults, maybe because I don't know exactly what I want to do with this role. But as I read this through, I know I don't want this regular technician to be able to change ticket templates. You know, I don't want them to be able to change something that's a global setting for the whole team. So I'm going to uncheck that. General/personal recommendations is it's easier to add permissions than it is to take them away. And so you may want to kind of look through this and say, what do I want to start with as the minimum set of permissions, and then grant if I find, you know, as I'm working in the tool or as technicians, we kind of decide how things are going to work, then I can add permissions at that time. So you may want to uncheck a few here. We generally don't ever give delete permissions to just a regular technician. Those are usually reserved for your enterprise admin level people. So this section of the security role for this application has permission sets that deal with just this application. So again, we're inside of the facilities app. And so these permissions only apply to someone who has access to the facilities app. They could have a completely different set of permissions in the IT application, for example. So anything that's inside of this app is specific to that application, which is nice. So you can have different settings. So we'll go ahead and click save and to, you know, kind of commit our security role that we just made. And then you saw it automatically refreshed there, and we have part-time tech has been added to the list. And if it didn't automatically pop up for you, you can click refresh and it will show in the list. So I have a question came in that says these roles are just for techs working tickets, correct? Not people that can submit a request to that app. That is correct. You'd only be creating security roles for people who will work inside of TD Next in this application. The client role is really handled through the portal. They submit their tickets through the portal. And so we have that client role over on the portal side of things. And if you're doing email creation, you don't need a role inside of the app to like email a monitor. So there's no client role really necessary for that. So good question. Let me know if you need anything else clarified. So minimum we'd want to set up enterprise and tech, and then you may have additional ones from there, but that's how we create a security role inside of our ticketing app. Are there any other questions about that? Okay. Quick stretch break. So we'll be like our friend the polar bear here. Do a quick stretch. Been thinking I need to get a standing desk, but I know I probably won't use it even if I did have one. And so I've been resisting the urge, but I probably should get one.
I do have one, and well, I have a sit stand. I mean, I stand a couple times a week, maybe.
Yeah, it's better than not at all, like I do. So
not a whole lot though.
Yeah, so it can go either way, right? It doesn't, I would never survive with a stand all the time desk. There's no way. It would have to be adjustable.
Right. It's nice as an option.
Yes. So we're going to talk about service forms now. So we've created a role for our technicians to work inside of the tool. And then now we're going to create some forms to fill out to create tickets. So the purpose of these are to require specific fields to be filled out when a ticket is created. So that can be required for the technician or the customer. So as an example, a MAC address. And so if you're having a network issue and that's the service in the form we're creating, we would make MAC address required for the customer to fill out when they're submitting that ticket on the form. It's a really great way to get that information you need to begin troubleshooting up front. And so instead of getting an email that just says, I can't connect to the internet. Cool. What's going on? And you have to do all this back and forth of gathering more information. You can say they must fill out this network troubleshooting form that gathers the handful of things you need upfront to just check a few things or begin your troubleshooting process, which is really nice. It cuts down on, resolution time, because you can maybe solve the issue right away because you got the information that you needed. Each service can have its own custom form. And like I just described, you can get all the information you would need to know without the back and forth, and saves time for both you and the customer. I've been through this kind of transition of, we got rid of email and moved towards the service catalog. And there was some grumbling from people, because they were like, oh, it takes me more time to submit my ticket. Sure, yes, it does. But we cut our resolution times down so much because we got all that information up front. And so we were able to kind of tell that story with the data and say, here's how long it used to take, and then here's how long it's taking now, because you're filling out that information that we need up front. So useful for reporting. So you can see those data points that they're filling in. And so if you say it's required to tell me where you're located for a desktop troubleshooting ticket on your service, then you can say how many of the certain classroom had a problem and we had to go out there, if that was a required field on the form. So lots of capability in this area. I find this very exciting. It's a huge shift. If it's not something that you've done before, it can be really, really helpful. So to configure forms, we do that inside of TD Admin. And so in TD Admin applications inside of your ticketing app. So again, if you're an app admin, you just go to that TD Next admin section and then the forms section. Configure existing forms, so you can edit ones that exist already. There's a handful, one for each type of classification inside of the tool, which we'll look at in just a minute. But you can also make new forms by selecting the plus new. When you create a new form, you can copy them from existing forms. And so a tip here is that you may want to configure a base template so that you can use that to copy to create new forms. And so if you work on kind of your initial base template and you say, I like the order of these fields, and I always want to know somebody's alternate phone number, and so I've added that to my base set, then you can just create any new service with that being the copied kind of beginning of your new form that you're creating. So that makes it really nice. And so if you think sort of in terms of that consistency of style, you might want to create a base template and then just copy, from there as you create new ones. So then we select save, and then to save that form that we've created, and then we have an article on working the ticket forms. So some kind of tips and tricks of recommendations for including things to include on your base template. There are a little asterisk here saying that something is required. So what that means is that it will not let you save it without it, or the ticket will automatically add it back once it's created. And so there's several things like we talked about yesterday. The type is one of those things that is required, but it has become not as important in the system. And so the system does still require it to exist. And so you can just use that general, or if you ended up deciding to create a few other but still big buckets, you can have the type field on there and autofill it in with a value. And so we have kind of two sets of permissions for each field. On the client portal, which is what your customers will see, they don't care what service it is. They also don't care what type. They don't care about any of these things maybe, but this is all information that's important for your technicians that are working the tickets. And so we can hide certain fields that are on the form for customers, so they only see this short list. But then on the backside, when we're working the ticket, we can see and edit the value of all of these other fields. And so this becomes really helpful if you want your technicians to be able to, like if they're on the phone gathering information about a ticket, if you want there to be different sets of requirements for someone calling in and talking to a technician versus someone submitting on the customer portal. So So as you're starting a base form, these is kind of our recommendation, and then you can add things from there. Okay, so let's go over to our app and check that out. So I'm gonna click home just to go back to our main page here, and then applications, and then ticketing app. So we're still inside of the facilities ticketing app, and then we click forms. So most likely you'll just seeing the handful here that says change form, incident form, major incident. So these are just the base kind of default forms that exist in the tool. And so you can open any of these up and edit them just by clicking on them, and then you can make edits to that form. But we're going to kind of go through the exercise of creating one from scratch. So we'll click the plus new here and give it a name. And so what's something else that we do for facilities? I helped a facilities group set up like a key request. So key requests. So they need a new copy of a certain key. So that's the name of our form. So that's the service that we provide. We have a service on the catalog for that. And this is the form that's going to go with that service. The classification is the ITIL classification of the type of thing. So this is very much a service request. They're asking for a key. Something's not broken, and they just need a copy of a key. So that's a service request. And then down here is the choice where I can copy a ticket from, copy this form from an existing form. And so if this is my base form and I want to start from that same kind of beginning stage, then I can select that copy from. I'm not going to do that in this because I'm not sure what's on there. And then I just want to see what it looks like as kind of, if I don't copy it over, so we can kind of see what that looks like. So I click save, and then you can see it was added to our grid view here. And then I click on that title to open up the new page of the designer. So this is our form designer section, and you can see not much there. And so back over on our presentation, we would maybe want to add these additional fields to this form. So I'm going to hop back over to the designer. And so it just starts with the title and account department. Over here on the right hand side, this is where I can build my form. So what I'm going to do to just simplify this view for a second is flip over to standard. These are the default fields and likely all that you're seeing right now when it says both. And so standard would be just the base set of forms that exist in the tool. And so I can just start with those. And so let's see, I want a description because maybe I want them to tell me more about the room that they need a key to. And then I do want to know who the requester is. So I can just click and drag on these little hamburger icons, I think is what they call them, to drag this field over into my form and stick it in the order that I would like it to appear. So I'm going to put responsible down there at the bottom, and type is one of those required ones that ends up adding it to it, even if we don't have it on here. So we want to be able to fill this in automatically. So I've added several fields here in the designer, and you'll notice that I have two settings within each field. So for client portal and then for TD Next. And so if I hop back over the presentation, you can see that's represented here as well. So hidden versus editable and required for several different fields here. And so you can see it kind of put some defaults of just sort of suggestions to that. But if I click on this drop down, there are varying choices depending on what the field is. And so the type, we just have kind of like really only giving you the option to hide that because that's not something that a customer really should be filling out. But over here on TD Next, so the technicians who would be filling out this form, I have all of these choices. And so if I never want my technicians to have to worry about type because I'm going to just use that general default and not worry about it, then I might hide this and just fill in that general value. So I'm just going to put that right there. So this means that the value is applied, but it's not going to be visible on the actual form for clients or technicians. I see people do that same thing with service sometimes. And so they would bring this over. This form is always going to be for the key request service, which of course I did not create over in yesterday because we were in my environment yesterday. So I always want this service to be the same value that's filled in. And so I can use this for reporting purposes down the road, but my technicians don't have to worry about filling that in. So hide that from the customer, hide it from the technicians too, because they don't need to fill that in, but we have the value for reporting purposes. Another kind of tip on this is source. So let me bring over the source field, and your customers hopefully are filling this out on the customer portal. And so again, we don't need to ask them to choose a value here. But I do want, when a ticket comes in from the customer portal, that value to be filled in automatically. And so let's see what we've called that here. So client portal is the value for the source when they're filling it out on the client portal. But I'm going to leave it editable for technicians. But you can see here this default applied. So that means that, well, if I click on edit, we get a little bit more of an explanation here. If this is checked, default applied, then that means that when the ticket is, this form is used in TD Next, that value would be applied. Now, if I'm filling it out because someone called me and I'm filling out the key request form for them, I don't want that value to be applied in TD Next because I'm a technician filling it out on their behalf. So if I click save on that, you can see the default is ignored for TD Next. So that's kind of like saying it's editable and the default is ignored for TD Next. So that means if I'm a technician and I call up this form, this value is not filled in and I have to choose from the list. And maybe I want to make that required because I want to make sure that my technicians do fill out the value. So I get good reporting of how many people are filling it out from the client portal, how many people are calling in for key requests. And so I can pull that data point. So if I add a field and I changed my mind about it, then I can click remove and just remove that from the list. I can also drag these around over here or use my move up and down arrows to get things in the proper order. So I'm going to click save on our changes to this list so far. And then I want to hop over to preview really quickly and just kind of show you what the results of what we just did. So in preview, you can click on client portal and it shows you the fields that someone would see for this form on the client portal. So only 4, right? So very limited, very easy for them to fill out because this is maybe the minimum of information that we need for a key request. If I click on TD Next, then you see we get more fields. So it's still those 2 that are on the designer page are still hidden and with the values filled in, but then you can see here source I have to choose because it's required and it has popped up for me as a technician. And additional other fields that have, you know, kind of popped up for me to fill out as a technician. Okay, so any questions about standard fields and kind of form design and, you know, organizations and options that we're seeing here? We're going to talk about custom attributes in just a minute. So we'll see more about custom and, you know, how your view gets with if you have both things in there. But any questions about standard? Okay, I do want to show one other thing. So let's see. Let's take the title field as an example. One kind of just funny thing that we see across user base is if title is left here, a lot of times people want to put in there like their working title, like I'm an implementation consultant. And so I put that in there rather than the title of the ticket. And so if you click on the edit button, you get, we saw this from before, but we also get these options for a custom field name and a custom placeholder. So we recommend that you change the title to subject. So that people kind of understand that we mean title of the ticket or subject of the ticket. And so if I change that and then I click save, you can see that changes to subject instead of saying title. So the backend name of the field is still title, but the customer will see subject. And so each field can have its own custom, you know, name like that. And so let's say for description, we want to say, I don't know what an example would be on this one, but like, tell us more, tell us about your issue, right? And so that's the custom field name, just directing for this form what we want in this field a little bit more clearly. The other option that we have is custom placeholder, custom field placeholder, which is a value that you can put in that is like kind of grayed out text for just to kind of help them further, like what do I want in this field? And so a great example of this is if back to that MAC address example, if you are wanting someone to put in a MAC address, you put in a fake MAC address, you know, in the style with the colons and everything that you want. And so that sort of helps them like, oh, this is what I should be looking for to fill in the value of that field. So just lots of really cool things you can do to make it as easy as possible for your technician, for your customers to fill in this information. Another thing is custom field tech, custom help text. And so you can see right here, every kind of baked in field has a default set of help text, but you can change that. So if you want to say very specifically, give us this information or give them examples of things that they may want, and you don't really want it in the body of the field like we have for the placeholder text. It's just here's a little bit more information if they open up the little help icon. So you can customize that text on your fields. Okay. Haven't seen any questions roll in. I hit save on our few changes we made. This does try to warn you, but if you like were to just, you know, I'm like one of those people that's just always saving as I'm working, so I don't accidentally lose something. So definitely do that. It does try to warn you in certain, like if you leave a certain screen or whatever, if you haven't saved, but it's good practice to just hit save as you're making changes to your form. Okay. So this presentation is available to you in your project. And so if you want to come back and refer to this slide as you're building your template of your kind of base form, then you can pull that back up. Or if you want to take a quick screenshot, there you go. So some more tips and tricks on configuring forms. If you leave the due date on the form, hide it from your customers. And so this is just another kind of experience thing. Do what works best for your organization. But we tend to see that if you put due date, people put yesterday or, you know, today, because they think that what they want it now, right? And so you may want to hide it from your customers so that they're not doing that. But your technicians can fill it in, or you can set a default like we looked at with the source. And so you can say it defaults to 2 days from when they put it in, but they can't edit that. It's hidden and it's just in there. Default your source. So we went through kind of this kind of process here, and to set the value for the source for the catalog, but then ignore the default for TD next. So your technicians have to fill it in, because maybe they're getting phone calls, they're getting people walking into their office, they're getting walk-ups to like a service desk or something like that. And so you may have different values that the technicians would use. And so they have to choose from the list rather than it defaulting. Change title to subject or something similar, so that people don't think they need to put their job title in there. They'll put the subject of the ticket. And then the changes specified on the slide can only be changed at the form level, so not in mass. So this is a good reason to configure your base and get it looking really like the way you want with that. Change that title to subject, put in the defaults, and all of that. And so you get a really good base setup that you're going to want on every catalog form, and then use that to copy and build your specific service forms from there. Because if you make a change and you decide, oh, I do want to put due date on every form, then you have to go back and do that to every form that already exists. So try to spend a little bit of time figuring out what your base will be before you start hammering in all of the forms, so that you get a good starting point. All right, another stretch big. I'm gonna take a drink of water. Now we're going to talk about custom attributes. Excuse me. So this is really where this can get super fancy, is getting into the custom attributes. So we had a list of, I don't know, I think it's like 25 or so baked in standard default fields. And then the custom attributes are the ones that you can create for your own purposes. And so you create your own forms on those fields on those forms. And so again, that I need a MAC address for a hardware networking problem. I need the model of your computer for a purchase or something like that. You can also create attribute dependencies on relationships between these custom attributes. And so if someone says, I need help with a Mac or PC in one thing, and then you say PC, and then you give them a drop down of all of the Windows versions that you may have in your environment, and then they have to select the Windows version. So really cool cascading dynamic forms that you can create based on those dependencies and your custom attributes. This is useful for reporting. Again, anything that is a field that you define that, well, really any of them you can report on, but of course reporting becomes easier if it's a static set of values. So it's a drop-down list, or it's a yes, no, or something like that. You can still sort of report on text fields, but that means that you're relying on your customers to put in the same word all the time, or something that you could report on. So if it's something that is a set of values, then do that and give them the drop down, or give them the pick list, or give them the checkbox list for those, so that you get more consistency and you can pull better data. So a tip, of course, like I mentioned before, column E from that spreadsheet yesterday can be used for these custom attribute fields when you're building your forms. So as you're working with your service owners to gather that information, be sure they fill out column E, so then you can use that to build your forms at this stage. And then we have a article on how to work with custom attributes there. But of course, we will go through creating them as well. So where to do this is still in TD-admin inside of your ticketing application, and then in the attributes section. We'll click plus new, and then we have several fields that we would fill out to create the attribute. And so we give it a name, of course, and then the header text is a shortened version of the name. And this is what is the column header in reports. So there's I think it's 25 characters, but there's a limit on the number of characters because those are used for reporting columns. And so you just kind of shorten the version of your name. The attribute type is literally the type of attribute. So what we have a drop-down list of styles of attribute that you can use. So pick list, a yes, no, we have a color choice, several different choices in that drop-down there. The description or help is what displays of the blue question mark is clicked. And so that default help text, because this is not a standard field, you want to put in help information about this field that you're creating. And then protected limits visibility. We won't get too much into this today, but if you have a value that you need to limit who can see it, say a social security number or a provider number or something like that, you can set up a protected custom attribute that you then can add a level of security over and say only these people can see it, only members of this group can see it, that kind of thing. So use those sparingly because they can't be deleted. And so if you're going to play around with that, do that in Sandbox so that you don't end up with an attribute that you don't really end up needing because they can't be deleted. And that's just to protect data. And then updatable is for values that will change often. And so I usually see people click this thinking, well, yeah, I want people to be able to change it. But this is only for things that will change very often, because if you check that box, that means that this shows up on the update screen for a ticket when you're like changing status and sending information to the customer, then this is available there. And so something that's like the model of computer that they're needing help with probably doesn't need to be updatable because it's always going to be that PC that they've put in the ticket about. And so you probably wouldn't check updatable for something like that. And then client visible toggles whether or not something is sent in a notification to a customer and is visible in the client portal. So I would say this is usually checked because you want people to be able to see the value that they submitted for a certain thing. And so if that's checked, then they can see it if they go visit their ticket on the client portal. But up to you. If you have something that you don't care that they see after they submit it, then you maybe don't need to check that box. So we click select save to save our custom attributes. So let's hop over to TD admin. So I'm going to close the form that we were working on with the key request. And so we could just click back home just to start from the beginning. And again, applications and then facilities, we'll stick in that app today. And then I have the attributes section here. So several existing already. You probably don't have any in yours just yet. And so this is another really great point. This is a wonderful example of good naming conventions. If you are an organization that you're gonna, like, you can already see, I'm gonna have a bunch of these custom attributes, do start out with a really good naming convention. And so this is what they have set up here is general help being the name of the form, and then the purpose of the attribute, request urgency, general help. So we had a housekeeping service, and so they have 4 fields that have to do with housekeeping. I'm pretty sure I made this one, trash and how messy is it? And so that's the form name, and then what is the attribute. So as this list grows and grows and grows, if you have something that just says trash question mark, you're like, well, what does that belong to? Or if you have 2 similar forms that's like an event pickup that also asks a question about trash, then you need to know which one belongs to which field if they're different. You of course can use the same fields across multiple forms. And so for that scenario, I recommend that people call them global dash whatever the purpose is. And so that's something that you know is going to be used across all forms or many forms, something like that. So be thinking about a good naming convention so that you can organize this list as it grows and grows inevitably. So I'm going to click plus new to create a new attribute, and attribute name. So I'm going to say key because it's going to go for our key request form. I don't know, key style. That's maybe they want we have like physical keys versus key cards or something. That'll be our example for this. So the attribute name is key dash style. I'm just going to use the same name for the header text because it's short. Now I could do, something like these can be different, but again, just to make it easier on yourself to have good lists and views here on the backside, we recommend giving it that good kind of header name within the attribute. So here's our attribute type, all of the choices of the style of attribute that you can put on your form. And so what's tricky about this is that once you pick and then you hit save, that you cannot change the type. You can come in here and change name and header text and all the rest of the choices, but you cannot change the type. So just be aware of that as you are creating things. If you're like, oops, it really needed to be just a drop down and not a multi-select list, well, you'll have to delete the old one and create a new one to change the type. So this is, I'm going to make this a drop down because they have to pick one or the other, a key card or a physical key. And so I'm going to pick drop down, and I'm not going to fill out a help description right now, but then here are checkboxes for the different items. This is not an updatable thing because my technicians should not be changing the type of ticket, the type of key very often. So I don't need it to be updatable, but I do want the client to be able to see what they submitted. And so checking that box so that it will be able to be seen on the notifications and on the client portal. So I click save there. And this is yet another place where you click save, then you get more choices after you have saved the object. And so here I have the choices tab. And so I would put in metal key and add another row for a key card. All right, and then I can put them in a specific order if I want. A lot of choices. I can also even use this like kind of paste row. So if I have a long list of things, I don't have to type in each one like that. I can use this function to paste in several values and it will generate my list for me, which is super nice. That's a relatively new function. And so it was high demand. to have that. So, but I've only got 2 choices for this example, so I'm going to hit save. Excuse me. All right. So I'm going to close that attribute, hit search to kind of refresh this page. And so there's our new custom attribute. So I'm going to hop over to the forms and open up our queue request form again. And so now if I click on custom, you can see that list of custom fields that I saw before now includes this key style. And I'm going to just drag it over to my form. And so it does maintain that name and that naming convention that we created on the object just a moment ago. But if I want to say a little bit more like a friendly, what type of key we want, then I can give it a custom field name and then that shows up there. And then you have the choices for your customer. And of course, our editable, is it required? Probably. I do need to know what kind of key you need for the request. And then if someone's calling in and making this request, it's still required from the technician side. So I've set that there. And so I'll click save and then hop over to preview. And there is our what type of key do you want? Okay. Oh, question came in. Hopefully not too long ago. No, just a few minutes. All right. So for some requests, we would need to collect the asset tag of the computer, like software installs. Would we need to make a customer attribute for that, or would this be pulled from somewhere with somewhere else within TD Next? Okay. So assets specifically, we hop over to our well, let's see. You have a couple ways you could do this, but so on a form specifically, so let's pretend this is something that we would want to get asset information from. You do have a baked in default asset CIs field. And so if I bring that over, that basically connects to the assets application here. And so if you remember from yesterday when we said this service is tied to an asset app, if you have multiple asset apps, you can kind of tie your services to asset apps. Like we have a couple in here. And so hopefully that, you know, the service that we're using, we would have selected the maybe IT assets asset app, and then that connection informs what list is available from this attribute. So if I click on that magnifying glass, I get all of the assets that exist in that application. And so you're asking the customer to then pick the asset from this list. And it's searchable, you know, as you can see at the top up here, they can search, you know, themselves as the owner, that kind of thing, to actually tie the asset object that's in Team Dynamics to this ticket directly. So hopefully that helped answer your question. Let me know if not, or if you have more questions based on that explanation. So that baked in standard asset CI field. Great. Other questions about custom attributes? Yes, more questions, I think is what that yes is. Okay. Go ahead and type it in the Q&A. Oh, is there an option for a cascading list? If you mean, I guess that depends on what you mean exactly, but like software is an option in 5. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Okay, perfect. I was hoping that's what you meant. So yes, that's called an attribute dependency. And so the key to creating a dependency is to have the two attributes created. So your example would be, you know, the software option, and then 5 options under that. So you'd have software and then what are the 5 choices? And so I believe that these 2 that I made before were an example of that. Yeah. So let's look at that. So the first attribute of trash is, is there trash that needs to be cleaned up? Yes or no. So it's simple yes or no question. And so, but then if they say yes, then we've asked, well, okay, how messy is it? And so if they say no, then they don't get this second attribute that pops up on this form. And so we have the two attributes that we will be linking together created here. And then under attribute dependencies, that's where we build that relationship. And so if I click plus new, then that's how I get that screen. But let's just pull up this one that's already existing. So here's our dependency mapping. And so I've named it housekeeping trash because they related to the housekeeping field form and service, and it has to do with the trash questions. And so that's where I got the name. And then here under the choice mapping section is where I delineate whether or not that what pops up basically. So if they say no, then I don't want this other question to pop up. But if they say yes, then I want them to be able to pick between all three of these choices in the second option. Now, if I had like yes, no, maybe, and if they said maybe, then I only wanted them to be able to ask to say it's not bad or it's medium. Then I can have sort of those different choices in the mapping. So let's pop over to this housekeeping form so you can kind of see what that cascading choice looks like. So go over to preview here and say I'm on the client portal, and well, maybe someone has removed that field from the form. Let's see. Oh yeah, we don't have so this is a good example. We don't have those fields on the form right now. So let's say I want to put them up here by kind of the top area of our question. So I have to put the two fields that I want people to be filling out. And so trash and how messy is it? Maybe those would be in the, oh no, they need to say, is there trash? Yeah. Okay. So we'll put that one first. And then you can see this little link represents that there is a dependency that's available, but we have not said, yes, I want to use this dependency on this form yet. So I want to link these two together with that dependency that I created a moment ago. And so I click edit. And then I have now this dependency drop down. And so I can say, I want to use this dependency on this form. Reason this is this way is because if you had several fields that you're using across different forms and you wanted them to act differently on the different forms, you can choose which dependency you want to happen on this particular form with these fields. So click save there. And so now you can see it's filled in on the link is kind of filled in so that we've actually created that link between the two. And we'll click save and then hop over to preview. And so now I have how messy is it? And then I say, oh, is this backwards? This is backwards, but you can kind of see. So I've set up, I've picked a choice, and then now I get that kind of cascading. I should have just created one from scratch, sorry, and not touched one that someone maybe had messed with since I made it. But so if I go back and maybe fill and like remove this value, you can see those two things are linked together. And here's one that it looks like John had added. And so if I say I need a full cleaning, then I don't get a secondary option. No cascading attribute popped up, but if I click partial cleaning, then I get this other question that pops up that says, well, okay, what area do you need cleaned? And so if it's a really big room or something like that, I can give more information about that based on my answer there. So hopefully that helps. So yes, you can have cascading or dependent attributes. Several steps to kind of create that And that article kind of goes over everything that I just went over in a little bit more detail, but you can also review the recording and kind of go through the steps. And so it's going to be, the trick is create your attributes that need to exist first. Right. And so we have the attributes and all their choices, and then you create your dependencies between those attributes that already exist. Because if you try to do the dependency first and the attribute doesn't exist, you won't be able to choose the thing from the list here because it doesn't exist yet, right? Okay, let me know if there are other questions about that or if we want to go back over anything. But some more tips and tricks on configuring custom attributes. Reuse your attributes across forms. So that example I said where you may say global dash something like alternate phone number. If you're going to have someone the ability to put in their alternate phone number across every single ticket form, then use that same attribute over and over and over. And you can rename attributes to make changes on the form specifically. And so it's even if the words need to be slightly different per each form, use the same attribute because you can set up that custom name on the particular form. Whoops, sorry. You can create an attribute directly from a form. So I don't like to do it this way. I like to show people go over to the attributes kind of screen and make your attributes because you get the full breadth of options. And so if you do it on the form, you don't get all of the options, but it is useful for sort of on the fly creation. You know, if you're looking at a form and you're like, oh, okay, I forgot a thing. And so you can just make it straight from the form itself. So to show you quickly what that looks like in the designer here, you can just click this add new field. And so if I click that, you can see it's a little more streamlined because there's not as many options for creating this type of field. So I didn't get those checkboxes at the bottom. I can't make a custom, protected custom attribute from here. I just get like the limited minimum that is needed to create a new field. Now, if I create something here and then I need to edit it again, I can go, it will show up in my list of attributes here. So if you do it that direction, it's not like you did anything wrong. It's just you have to then come over here to make like the more advanced edits. Create static content directly on forms. I'll show you that in just a minute. And then create protected custom attributes in Sandbox. So I mentioned this, you cannot delete protected custom attributes. And so if you think you'll use them, maybe mock that up in Sandbox, play with them on how they work and everything so that you can test the functionality and make a decision whether you're going to use them or not. Because once they're created, you can't delete them. So static content is another way, like tool you have in your toolbox on forms to make them even better looking. So we looked at, I want to open up my key request form. So and go back over to the preview. Oh, see, I made a change and I needed to save it. So we click preview and this is what it looks like in the client portal. It's just all of the fields in a row here. And if I go back over to designer, I have this static content option. And so I want to maybe make like a section break down here by the subject. And so I'm going to drag that static content into that spot and then say, what is the element type that I want to add? And so a heading maybe of like, this is the request details. We'll put that in so we can see what that looks like. Hit save and then boom, now we have just a static header. It's just text that sort of breaks up the view of the ticket. So if you want to make some like section breaks to make it a little easier to read, you can use the static content for that. Another reason that I've seen people use static content is for like special notes that you really want someone to be able to see. You might do a text block of say, please don't give us your social. Right? Maybe something like that. Please don't give us your social. And so we put this little box that's just above this certain field that we really want to call attention to, I can create that static content, hit save and preview, and we'll see what that looks like over here. Just a little line of information. So you're not having to rely on people opening that box for something that's that important. So static content, another really good thing to be, if you think you might use that, work that into your base template so that you can have it there for when you copy your ticket, so that if you decide later you want one of those headers, you're not having to go back and add it to every form that you've already created. You had it on your template and you use that to copy and create your new forms. Okay. Any other questions about forms or attributes, custom protected attributes, attribute dependencies? Okay, assigning forms to services. So now we've created our form, and yesterday we created our service. And so we need to link them up together. And so we created our form in the customer portal. Remember, the client portal was where we were yesterday. And then we had our form that we made in our ticketing application. And so we need to kind of link the two together. There are two ways to assign a form to a service within TD admin in the client portal application and then editing the service. But you can also do this from the client portal itself. So you go to TD client in the service catalog and then open up that certain service that you're trying to connect to, and then use the form tab to edit that existing service. And so we'll look at this one. I think that this way is a little bit like people tend to do the work of editing the portal from the portal itself rather than admin, just because you get more options when you're in the actual TD client application rather than going at it through TD admin. So either way we add it, we would then select save. And so here's this article again, working with ticket forms, which includes that part of it, of linking them together. A tip here, a form can be used in more than one service. So you can link the same form to different services inside of your catalog. And so if you are thinking about doing this, weigh the pros and cons of reusing a form versus creating a base form and then copying and modifying it. My opinion of this is, if there's some reason that you need two different services in your catalog, then that means you probably need two different forms, because if it's called one, like, why do you need the two different names in your catalog? There, of course, are situations where that's necessary, or it's for helping people navigate the catalog, but consider using tags for searching, or your service information page to just, explain to people like when they should be using a certain service. And so then it's that one service to one form is usually a little cleaner. But you may have just a general form that you use for services that you haven't have not had time to create a specific form to. And then you can just use that general one until you have time to create specific forms. And so that's something I've definitely seen people do if they roll out their portal and that haven't had time to create a specific form, maybe for certain services. So just some things to think through there. Okay, so let's hop over to the admin and TD portal or TD client to link our form to a service. So here I am in the client portal, and I want to find a service. Since we built a service yesterday in a different environment, we won't have the exact one, but I'm going to click on services and see what we have under facility services as an example. So we'll pretend this is key requests. And so paint a facility is the form we're going to link, or the service we're going to link our form to. So I'm going to open that service and click edit service. And then under settings, what is this service? Maybe we'll make a new service for key requests real quick. Won't take long, and it'll be a review from yesterday. So key requests. We'll fill in all of that stuff. And so just to call back to what we were mentioning about assets earlier. So this is where I have 2 asset applications in this environment. And so if I wanted to use an asset field on my service, then I can choose from the list there to indicate which asset app I want to link to. And then my request application, we built that form in the facilities, and I'm going to pick a type just to have that in there, and then click save. Okay, so we have an actual key request service that we can link this form to. And so I'm going to click edit service, and then I have a form section here. I think I have my permissions must be all messed up in this environment. So I need to make some adjustments today after we get done with this session. So I've created this service, and now I have the form section, and you can see create a new form is an option here. We don't recommend really going this route. You really want to create the form over an admin before you then link it to the service, because again, you just get more options. It works a little bit better in the long run. So we've already created our form. And so we want to use an existing shared form. So I choose that radio button there, and then I get some choices in, we can see our list over here. I'm going to choose the key request form that we've been working on, and then click save. And so now the key request form is attached to this service. And I'm going to click save again to just save that change. And now if I go back out to the service itself and click request service, there's our form that we just built. We can fill in all the pieces of information and request this service from the catalog. Any questions about adding the service to, or adding the form to the service, I suppose. Sorry for the little hiccup there. Like I said, I need to check my permissions, and I think I have like limited editing inside of this environment. So you should have that form option there. If you are like, whoops, I connected the wrong form. If you scroll down to the section here, you have remove form. If you accidentally picked the wrong one or something, you can click that to remove it, and disconnect those 2 objects from each other, and then come and pick the right thing. No questions come in so far. All right. We made it a little bit over an hour to get to our first our 5-minute break here, and so we'll take it's 1:10 here in Central Time. So at 1:15 we'll come back. See you in a few. You enjoyed. Thanks, Michelle. Okay, we'll move on to our last major topic, and then have time for questions and everyone's favorite part, our quiz. So we're going to talk last about status values. And if you thought of any questions about any of our previous topics, please throw those in there. We can talk about those at the end. So the purpose of status values to tell where a ticket is in its life cycle. And so here we have listed the default set and kind of what our purposes are for them. You can create custom statuses, and you can also change the names of these. So we'll look at that in a moment, but as it says down here at the bottom, you cannot delete them. So this is an area that if you're going to kind of like model out something, do that in Sandbox. You can deactivate this. And so if you end up creating one, you're like, oh no, I didn't really want that, then you can deactivate it. So it's not available in the list, but it will forever be in your admin console in production. If you do this in Sandbox, then of course it gets overwritten with the Sandbox refreshes that happen every quarter. So new, the general idea of each of these services, new being nobody knows that this ticket exists yet. Open is we acknowledged it, but haven't actually started working on it yet. In process, we're actively working on it. Then the resolve step being that the service provider thinks that the ticket is complete, and then you are saying, hey, we think this is done, but it gives the customer the opportunity to say, no, it's not. And so closed would be the customer and the service provider agree that the ticket is complete. Canceled is for the service provider or the customer to decide that we didn't need this ticket. Usually this is utilized with the withdraw function in the client portal. And so if someone says, oops, I put this in and never mind, it fixed itself, or I don't need this anymore, they can withdraw it, and then that moves it to a canceled status. But technicians, of course, can cancel a ticket as well manually. And then on hold, we're waiting on some resource. And so this may be, I've asked the customer a question, so I put this ticket on hold, and that pauses the SLA timers and also lets me know I don't need to look at it until maybe they reply, and because I'm waiting on an answer from them. And so, or you've ordered a part or something like that. So reasons that you might pause the SLA, or that you don't need, that you're not actively working on the ticket, so you can use that status. These statuses trigger SLAs, and so we'll learn a little bit more about that later, but there are there's SLA timers for responded by and resolved by, and so that is triggered off of these statuses. And so you want to kind of set up your business processes and these statuses to a way that makes sense so that you can properly meet those SLAs. Again, can't delete them, so don't forget that if you're getting in there and adding anything that you think you might need. An article about working with ticket statuses and a little bit more information in there. So as I said, you can customize an existing status value, or you can create new ones. And so where we would do that is inside of the ticketing application in TD admin applications under the statuses section. You click plus new to create a new status, or select the edit next to the existing status, and you can change any of these items on that status. So the order in which they show up in the list, the description of the purpose of the status, whether or not it's active. So if you make one and you're like, or one of the default ones, you say, we're never going to use something, I don't know, open. If you just want to go straight from new to in progress and you're never going to use open, you can mark it as inactive, something like that. The class is really important, because if you do choose to make different statuses, like I've seen, there's on hold dash awaiting customer, and then on hold ordered part. So we need some reason to distinguish between those two purposes. So we have two statuses. They're both inside of the on hold class. And so this becomes really helpful and important for reporting and filtering and all of that, to say, instead of you having to select individual statuses, you can say any status within the class of on hold, rather than saying these three on hold statuses. You can say the whole class of on hold, which is nice. It's kind of future proofing your environment to use the class for those purposes rather than the individual status names. So let's go look at that over in admin. So again, from the home applications and facilities ticketing app here, we have the statuses section. And I can see a couple have been added in this environment. And so there's some examples of that on hold because we're waiting on the customer for something, or we're waiting on a vendor to do something. They also have added a reopened status. So let's say we want to change new. I'm going to click on edit here, and I can change. So I said new, but I clicked on open. I want to change. So I want to call this assigned. Because for my business processes, that means like someone's looked at it and it has been assigned to someone. So we're going to have that our business process be to change the status. And so it's the second one in the list still, because it's the second action. I'm going to make it active because I want to use this. And it is a part of the in process status because someone has looked at it. So that means work has begun in a sense. So I'm going to click save. And so now we can see it has changed the name. And it is, now active. And so I have all of these in this list. I can change the order. And so this is just the order of the list drop down. So if I want, canceled as like, I'm never going to select that from the drop down list. So maybe I make this 10 so that it's at the very bottom. of our list here for my technicians. So just ease of use kind of functionality there. If I wanted to create a new one, I just click the plus new and I get those same options that I had from editing an existing one. I'm not going to add one to this environment since it's something that can't be deleted, but here's where you choose your status classes. You cannot create a new class. These are fixed. They are what they are. And so everything has to fit inside of one of these existing classes. There we go. So status is pretty straightforward, but what's another thing that's nice about this is the status lives inside of this ticketing application section, right? And so the facilities group can have their own set. They could have 3 statuses. They don't have to use all of these if they don't want to. They can have 15 and they can have all those different statuses, whereas the IT group has their own ticketing app with their own set of statuses and business processes and everything there. And so it's not something that's has to be shared across the tool. So you can have your own set of things inside of those ticketing apps. Any questions about status? That's fairly straightforward, but a very nice area that you can, kind of set up your own purposes and everything in there. One last stretch break. And on to our quiz to test our knowledge. Oops, and not go on to this test, the next page yet. Let's pull up that quiz. Thank you, Michelle. You're always so much faster. I can never find that. Okay, so please take a few minutes to fill out the quiz here. I'll do like I did yesterday and just read them aloud for the recording. So when creating a form, is it best to start from scratch each time? So it's a yes or no or true false there. What license type is best to give a part-time technician? A couple of choices there. Can you delete a protected custom attribute? The ticket contact field can be used to, a couple of options for that purpose, which we didn't talk about. So we'll see if our deduction skills, how we do on that one, and we can talk about that purpose, which is not an ITIL service classification. So these are our classifications that we see in the ticketing app. So take a couple minutes and fill that out for me, and we'll go through the answers. We almost got half. Let's get a couple more people fill that quiz out. All right, great. Thank you to everyone that's participated there. We'll go ahead and go through the answers. Okay, our first question, when creating a form, it is best to start from scratch each time. So the answer to that one is false. We want to create a template kind of starting place, and then we copy from that template so that we kind of have that same base to get started, and we have that consistency across the tool. So good job, we all got that one right. What license type is best to give a part-time technician? So definitely technician on that one. They are not a client, they're working inside of the ticketing application. So we wouldn't give them that license, but they are also not someone who's going to be making edits and probably doing those high level things inside of the ticketing app. And so technician is definitely the appropriate license there. Can you delete protected custom attributes? So a little bit of a split on this one. The answer is no, you cannot delete them. And so they, again, it's for protection of data reasonings that what they created, that you cannot delete a protected custom attribute once you've created it. Now you can delete a regular custom attribute. So those you can delete and do with as you choose all day long. But you cannot delete a protected custom attribute. The ticket contact field can be used to, let's see, the choices here include another client or technician within the ticket email notification, make a phone call to a customer, or edit a ticket. So like I said, we didn't talk about this one, but a lot of people are a good deduction. The right answer is include another client or technician within the ticket email notification. So the contact field is like in another person selects field. And so the requester is the person who signed in and requesting the ticket, but the contact could be somebody else within the environment that they're choosing to include. And so there's a lot of functions and settings you can turn off and on that we won't get into today about contacts and whether they can view things on the customer portal and all of that. And so it's a powerful function, but it doesn't link to any like phone system or anything like that. So that answer wouldn't be correct. If you wanted to get someone's phone number, the phone field is available from your people import data. So you can bring in a phone number if you have that. If you don't have a good data source for that, then you can always add a custom attribute where they can put in their alternate phone number and just type that in, and it would be kind of a custom attribute that you create. And then finally, which is not an ITIL service classification. So we have several choices here. Service request, incident, change, and problem are all ITIL service classifications. And so we'll look at where that lives inside of Team Dynamics. The answer to this one is ticket. So ticket is just what we call the object inside of Team Dynamics that people work. And every ticket is one of those other types that are listed. And so it's a classification. So I think we talked about this in maybe an earlier session, but a service request would be something like the key request that we built today, where it's a repeatable process. They say, I need a thing, and then you do XYZ and give them the thing. So nothing's broken. It's just a process that people follow. Whereas an incident is something that is broken typically. And so they're saying, I need some troubleshooting help with something. So something is interruption of service. And so that's an incident. And then change and problem are higher level kind of ITIL terms for making adjustments to systems and services through a change, or diagnosing the cause of a major incident. So if you want to know more about those ITIL terms, I believe we have some information in our knowledge base, but those are better explained in ITIL kind of best practices documentation. So I do want to hop over to I'm going to stop sharing those results there and hop over to our ticketing application main page. So if I click on the title of this application, this is where we see those classifications that were mentioned. And so these are all of the classifications. Notice ticket is not on the list because every ticket is one of these classifications. And so the object is a ticket, but then it's this certain classification from there. So if you're an organization that is like, I'm never going to do what ITIL calls problem management. And so you can come in here and toggle that off and say, nope, I don't want that thing. I'm not doing change management yet. And so I only want to have service request, incident, and major incident in here. You can toggle those off, and you can always turn them on later if you do decide that you want to do that, or always leave them off. Say it's a facility situation. I'm not going to do release management or problem management. Maybe I'm just doing, a little bit more, less IT focused things, which these kind of have focuses in the IT area. So that's your classifications here in the ticketing app. And again, this is a setting that's specific to the one ticketing app. And so facilities can turn off all the things and then, but one, and then IT could use all of them. And so kind of can separate business processes there. Okay, thank you again for your participation on the quiz there. Any questions about any of the questions? Any clarifications or anything? Classifications? Keep typing if you're typing anything in there. So our next steps are your action items. Configure your security roles for your ticketing apps. A minimum of the 2 enterprise and technician, but maybe you have others for your organization. Configure some service forms. So try configuring 5 forms within the next week. So really focus on that that template first and kind of get a good idea, and then do some practicing of creating things so that you, for different purposes, so you'll be able to tell what you may have missed on your template. So kind of going through that exercise of creating those 5 forms will help inform that default template. Configure some custom attributes, and then maybe even some dependencies if you have that need within there. So you can set up if they choose yes, then this other thing pops up. If they choose no, then a different set of choices pops up. Configure your status values. If you're not sure that you would need something new, just start with the default and then go from there. There's no reason to overcomplicate that if it's not necessary. And just remember that you can't delete things. If you create a status, it cannot be deleted. So practice around in Sandbox. You can expect maybe 3 hours to complete these action items. It just, again, sort of depends on the extent of your forms and how many custom attributes and how much work you want to put into kind of those cascading attributes if you need them. But distribute these tasks across your team and get some help to create those forms. And really, it's in the information gathering part from yesterday too, is really helpful to have that list of things that are needed for the different service forms. So just like yesterday, we had our list of how to get help on action items. So come to the workshop session. Is that tomorrow? Today's Wednesday, right? Yeah. So tomorrow from 1 to 3 Eastern time, log an issue and the whole team watches those and we can help you out. And there's an article on how to do that if you haven't yet. Update your action items as you go. So as you do something, check it off that list so we know how you're doing and how you're getting along in your homework. If you can't access your implementation project, we email this readiness help address, and Michelle and Jordan will help you out and make sure that you can get in there. And then finally, if you would like to speak to one of us, so maybe you want to kind of go through that cascading attribute dependency thing again, or you want to talk more about what your default form should look like and just sort of get our opinions, you can create an issue with kind of what you're looking for, and then book a 30-minute session with the team to talk through that. And so just be sure that you have that issue ID created already and put as much detail in there as you can so that we will be prepared for that conversation. We would love to chat and share our experiences always. So questions? Anything we need to go back over? Hopefully I didn't talk too fast. We're right at an hour and a half. Plus our 5-minute break. So we'll call that hour and a half of our content today. Not seeing any questions roll in, but maybe raise your hand or put something in the chat that you're still typing. Okay, last call. Not seeing anything. All right. Thank you all for your time and attention today. I hope you are ready to go with your ticketing essentials things, get some forms created, and get rolling with the services that we talked about yesterday. So let us know how we can help, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.